and welcome to Short and Sweet Revision. Again, your next revision video in the anthology, and today we're focusing on The Darkness Out There
by Penelope Lively. As usual, we'll have a question at the end for you to consider.
using a Peel paragraph. We'll put an L on the end today.
Right.
Okay, here we go, let's get cracking. So this story is all about a pair of teenagers who we understand are part of something called a Good Neighbours Club, and they're off to visit an old lady living alone in a cottage near the woods.
That's right. Now the story focuses on age, youth and perceptions of behaviour and challenging stereotypes. When I did this with my group, we did a column on the board showing things that we expect teenagers, or how we expect teenagers to behave and how we expect older people to behave, and this challenges those stereotypes of both age and youth.
Yeah.
So an interesting story. I quite
Definitely. I think even as a reader, as soon as you hear there's going to be an old lady, two teenagers, you assume certain things about these characters.
Yes, you do already before you start to read it.
Yeah.
So let's have a look.
Find out. Okay. So again, here's some information about the author, Penelope Lively. We must say that we have got this information straight from the AQA anthology section. So. Just in case it's not our own work.
No.
But the important things here to note down about Penelope Lively is that her work, we hear, appeals to a wide range of ages and backgrounds. And again, we've got this difference between age in the story.
That's right. Also, her work is, like it says here, concerned with the power of memory, and of course the old lady is living out a memory, and the relationship between the past and present, conflicting tensions between what happens officially and how things are remembered as well, which all come
really
into this.
Important, isn't
yeah,
it?
it is. Yeah.
Because as we find out in the story, the old lady tells the teenagers a story from her past, and there is some real tension.
And their reaction to it is quite profound as well. Okay.
But do read through that yourselves. Okay, so setting. This story takes place, the main places are Country Lane, Packers End, I should put apostrophe there, Mrs. Rutter's cottage, the woods, and we believe it happens in the 1980s.
That's right. Okay. Interesting. Packers End, we thought, was quite an interesting name, as if it's an end to something, and of course it was an end.
It sounds a bit
to
sinister,
something.
doesn't it?
Yes, it does sound sinister.
But the key thing here is that this setting, Country Lane, cottage, it's very much like a fairy tale.
It is.
Yeah, and indeed, we even have some of the lines from the story are very closely linked to Red Riding Hood, and we know Red Riding Hood goes along this country lane into the woods to meet her grandmother, and she's confronted by the wolf. But as we find out, there is no wolf. The only wolf is Mrs. Rutter, in a way.
Yeah, wild animals are mentioned though, aren't they?
Yes.
Which is kind of that links to that. Even on the second line, keeping to the track. And then further down the page, on page 23, she kept to the track.
Yeah.
It's like, just like you say, fairy stories.
Straight from
in fairy
Red Riding
stories,
Hood,
don't wander from the path,
No.
stay to the path, because of the danger of what is in the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So the important setting for this.
Indeed it is.
Point of view. So again, we're thinking about who's telling us the story. We know that the story is written in the third person narration, which means it's like he, she, and we see it through the eyes of these different characters. We have Sandra and Kerry and Mrs. Rutter, and we can see straight from their eyes almost how their opinions change after they hear Mrs. Rutter's story.
They don't expect her to this sweet, comfortable cottage loaf of a woman to come out with this story that is so bitter.
Definitely.
We'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
The opening of the story is a reported conversation. It's kind of leading us into, it's a device, if you like, and introduces us and leads us into the plot. We have to know why this couple of teenagers are going to the house. So it's a nice plot device.
But this is so read this first opening chapter quite carefully, because it's quite hard.
Yes, because
actually.
you need to see who's saying what and who is who. Yes, you do.
So,
because she's referred to as the girl.
Yeah,
of course.
The girl. So it's almost like a conversation, but again, we can see that there's no speech marks. It's
no,
not
that's
dialogue.
Right.
Okay.
That's right. And even I'll just mention it on that very first page as well. Line 25, the word dark is mentioned, which of course links to the title. So
definitely.
we will look at imagery in a minute as well.
Okay, so again, we'll just to highlight our characters, we're going to talk about characterisation now. We've got this, apparently at the start, we think a sweet old lady, a young teenage girl, and we'll meet him in a second when we move on from that page, but Kerry Stevens, who we assume is like your typical hoodie, you know, moody teenage boy.
With his hair slicked back. There's a reference to his hair being slicked back, isn't
Definitely.
there? Yeah.
Okay, so characterisation, again, we need to think about physical description. Miss, you just talking about the hair slicked back there. Dialogue, what they're saying, action, and comment from the author. So our main characters are Sandra, and the story actually begins and ends with Sandra.
It
And
does.
that's quite important because hers is perhaps one of the biggest sort of realisations.
And she starts in nature, and she ends up walking in the field and walking in nature again.
Yeah, so again, linking with the setting, we
Yeah.
start off on that path and we come
And
back,
we
onto
come
that
back
path.
to that path.
But things have changed, and that's
Yes.
the important thing.
Yes.
And then again, we've got Kerry Stevens and Mrs. Rutter.
Okay.
Miss?
Okay, some interpretations here. Packer's End, and a quotation from the story about Packer's End. You didn't go by yourself through Packer's End if you could help it, not after tea time anyway. And that is so like an old fairy story that we know from from when we were children. The nature and the woods and the path. She kept the track again. That's like the fairy story of Little Red Riding Hood. Lots of references to darkness and light. It was all right out here in the sunshine. So you've got this dark and light. And dark and light, of course, representation of good versus bad.
Yeah, we've got this throughout in a lot of different aspects of the story. We've got this contrast, darkness and light. We've got the stereotypes, the old lady, the young children, this contrast,
That's right.
okay? And it's really important that we think about this darkness because initially Sandra is scared of a dark place, as in the woods, as in a literal dark place.
So the safety should be in the cottage, which is, as we've got here, shrugged down into the dip, dropped down into the dip. So it should be safe. It should be, you know.
This is where she assumes the safety will be.
That's right.
But as we come to the end, and she has that realisation, that is not where she is safe. There is darkness everywhere. She even says, you can't close the curtains and shut out the darkness because she realises darkness.
That darkness being everywhere is, I mean, we talked about it with my group yesterday. At the end there, that darkness, we talked about the darkness in people.
Yeah.
The darkness in everybody. There is that side, and as we see it in the story.
And this is what Sandra comes to realize. She didn't think about darkness being within, did she?
No.
And
Kerry, you know the moment Kerry realises it, but then the realisation comes a little bit later with Sandra.
Definitely.
Okay, shall we?
Moving on. I just put this slide in here because Lively uses a range of similes, metaphors. It's one of the key language features that if you can just remember going into the exam, going, right, I know that the darkness out there has lots of similes and metaphors, you can talk about this. Okay, we've got one here, a creamy, smiling pool of a face. That one I think freaks me out a bit. I don't know what you think
I
about
know.
that one.
This next one, though, A No Man's Land of Willow Herb, that reference to No Man's Land, of course, with the war, you know, the No Man's Land in France between, you know, the soldiers where they go and fight. One of mine mentioned that yesterday. And I love this, a man with a toothbrush moustache.
Yeah.
And this army cap slicing his forehead as well.
Open.
Quite a
gruesome,
dramatic.
actually,
Yes, it is.
So as we know, if we're thinking about this, we haven't talked much about this, but Mrs. Rutter's story, the story she recalls, is all about a plane crashing down in the woods near a cottage from World War II.
That's right. And on the night that it crashes, she's in the cottage with her sister Dot.
Yeah.
And they discuss whether they're going to go out there, but it's a filthy night, pouring with rain.
Yeah.
And they, I mean, there's three things you do here. You kind of do nothing, or you get on your bike and go and get some help, or you go and have a look. And
They did go and have a look, didn't they?
They did go and have a look, but and found, heard the moaning, saw two people dead, heard the young boy or the young lad of 20 or whatever he was moaning and saying the word Mutter, which is German for mother.
Right. Yeah.
So he's trapped and he's dying. So off they go back home again and they go and have another look, and he's still alive.
Yeah.
And this is where our views of somebody old and cosy and comfortable and kind of disappears because she doesn't go and get help for the soldier because her husband was killed in the war.
Yeah, so
and
she's telling Sandra and Kerry this story.
The story, that's
and,
right.
We know that she had been married to an army officer and he died. So when she goes out and she sees this pilot in the plane, Mrs. Rutter feels like it's within her right to just walk away.
Walk away, yes.
And that there is the bit where straight away Kerry Stevens feels uneasy
Oh,
about
he
this.
does. And there's a moment on the top of page 31.
Yeah.
But just going back a little bit, when she's telling them the story, and she starts to say about her husband, on line 255, she actually says, "It's over and done with. Good riddance to bad rubbish. It's over and done with." But it's not over and done with, because here she is telling the story to these
and I
two
think
young
that's why
people.
it's almost so much
Such a shock.
Such a shock, because she's telling the story in such a matter-of-fact way, and she's obviously found peace with what she's done. That's so shocking, because it's such a graphic and terrible story. You'd think that you'd be like, that she would feel some regret, but she displays no regret whatsoever.
When Kerry says at the top of page 31, "But either way," and then you have those ellipses that show the pause, and it says the boy began, and he doesn't carry on, and everything you read on that page, then with Sandra and with Kerry, they are changing their mind. They're seeing a different side to this sweet old lady, aren't they?
Yeah, but I think Kerry gets it first. And
Kerry
we can
gets
see
it
that,
first,
because I think
definitely.
he's almost holding back, because he obviously doesn't want to
Yes.
offend this woman, because he's there to do a job.
That's
but
right.
you can see it straight away. And what is it? Is it expressionless face? What does it say? His face was
Don't know.
blank face.
Blank face.
So
Yes.
he's not showing any
You
emotion.
can't believe it.
No, can't believe it. But we'll get onto this. We'll move on to a little bit where Sandra gets her realisation. Yeah. No.
Go on.
Okay. So the themes here. So this is what's implied from what's going on. So we've got childhood dreams. If we link back to the start, actually, we hear how Sandra has got dreams of a white house, falling in love, getting married, and a real sort of idealistic view of the world. Okay.
So there is that childlike innocence, but then they are faced with the realities of life, and war and death are realities of life. So we've put in here one of the themes, stereotyping. We've got the age and the youth and the appearance, and we've put the violence of war.
Yeah, because the stereotyping here is the biggest issue, is because at the beginning we think, oh, must be like the young lad who's the hooligan in this story.
Is he going to nick something from the cottage,
but
that
no,
kind of thing?
Who's the evil one? The sweet old lady.
Yeah.
She is the wolf in sheep's clothing almost.
She is. She's the darkness. She's the dark one.
And then we've got this real violence in there, haven't we?
Okay.
And then the key thing that we were just talking about, an epiphany, which this means a kind of a realisation of something. You've suddenly, grasped an idea.
Of realisation.
Of clarity.
And that's here, miss, on page 33, almost at the end of the story.
End, yeah.
You could get people all wrong, she realised with alarm.
Yeah.
And she did, didn't she?
I like that, realised with alarm. It's like it suddenly hit her and she got, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I realised that absolutely anybody could be, have that darkness with them.
They can't quite believe it, because a couple of times Kerry said, 2 bloody nights, Christ. And he said, he kind of says this, he can't quite believe it. And he even says at one point, I'm not going near that old bitch again. And, he
outraged.
Can't believe that this little old lady, you don't usually use that word. Oh, are we running out of time, miss?
Yeah, we'll sum this up. Yeah. So again, is that epiphany for Sandra? She realises that is not there. Okay, so structure, same as we always say. You need to have a think about, does it fit the traditional story structure? And we think it does, pretty much.
Yeah.
Miss, do you want to just sum up the structure for us?
Okay, so we've got the story starting in the beginning of the girl with her dreams, and they go and see the old lady. Okay, I'm not going to be able to get through this. The ending of the story. She goes back, and she's back in the safety of nature. I want to point out all the times that darkness, or words to do with dark, are mentioned in the paragraph before the end. We're nearly out of time.
Yeah, we'll
show you the question.
Oh, so just remember with the structure, it begins and ends at the same place on that track.
It does.
Summary, just have a look at this in your own time. Oh, And this is your P question, okay? So why does she call it the darkness out there? If you do want to get in touch and give us your answers, please do. But thank you very much.